Hi.
Hi.
Hey,
Thanks for being
welcome.
with us.
Hey. How is
Happy
everyone today?
happy
Good.
Sunday.
Good.
Good. We were just starting talking about the book. I think we've got some good questions for you today. We
Okay.
appreciate you being here. I think the biggest thing is we can't wait for the second one to see where the story goes. It's like everything you like ramped us up on this roller coaster, and now we're in a holding pattern of like what happens next.
hmm
But what was your inspiration for this book? I'll go ahead and start out.
Well, my inspiration was actually an ID Discovery episode. It was about a Haitian doctor who was married to two women. One was living in Florida and his other wife was back in Haiti. And he had a fatal car crash. And when both women heard news of their husband dying in this car crash, they both came to the hospital. And that's when they discovered that he had been married to both of them simultaneously.
I'm a big ID fan, so you got me right there.
That's great.
Yeah, so you had quite a story going. You amped it up with three ladies.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. In the past, I've written like women's fiction and romance series, and most of the time the characters, I try to keep it in threes or fours. So I basically just stuck to the rule with this one. I thought it added a little bit more dynamic having three women present instead of two. It offered for more of diverse personalities as well.
and they did have, to me, unique personalities.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought about it since you mentioned it, but with three, if you had two, I think it would have been these two women in competition kind of thing. Just one going after the other dynamic. With three, that really changed the dynamic. That's interesting.
Yeah, and all three kind of deal with the news of finding out that their husband is married to someone else in different ways. Some are more competitive than others, and other ones are kind of just coming to terms with the idea of their marriage not being what they thought it was. And some too are actually trying to approach it from like Noelle approaches as more of a problem solving approach, that she's like, it's obvious that the man that I'm married to isn't who I thought he was. And maybe these women can give me more insight into what was going on in his life and who he presented himself to be to them. I want to know more about what was going on behind the scenes rather than seeing the other women as competition.
I liked Noelle's character. I liked how she was curious and did a lot of digging. Was there a wife that you enjoyed developing the most or had the most fun with?
Noelle was the one that I considered the most identifiable. Vanessa was the one that was most over the top. My writing under Shelly Ellis, I will definitely say, tends to go a lot more campy. And I'm very honest with that. If people are like, well, I thought the characters weren't completely realistic. Well, they weren't intended to be. So Vanessa was definitely the one that I could go more over the top. Noelle was the one that I tried to ground it a little bit more. I mean, she has her own background and the stuff that went on in her past, but she is a lot more problematic. She's like, I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to defend my place as his wife, because it's obvious if it's two other women he was married to, there isn't too much to defend. She was basically the one that was more practical. Vanessa was the one that I can indulge some more overtop, campy approach to writing a character.
I'm going to be all, holier than thou and say I don't watch the Real Housewives, but not even watching them, you're aware of them. But I kind of enjoy the Real Housewives vibe, or what I think that is, with Vanessa, with her clothes and her actions and the way she talked. And I thought, in my mind, that's what, one of these.
Yeah. And that was the intent that I like I said, the intent was to go camp with a lot of the characters and the situations, because the situation, in all honesty, even though it was an ID Discovery, it's a bit ridiculous. So when I was thinking of the story, I was like, well, I could play it straight, but it's such a crazy story. I think I can have fun with it. I'm pretty unapologetic about that. That I'm like, this was not intended to be a serious domestic thriller. It was meant to be over the top. The characters give the cue it's over the top. The situation gives the cue that it's over the top. And so, like I said, this was more meant for like the Real Housewives version of a domestic thriller. Yeah.
That it definitely felt that way to me.
Mm-hmm. And that was the intent.
What inspired you on Diamond's background?
What inspired me on Diamond's background, actually, this was a one-upsmanship. I had previously written romance where I had a character who was an exotic dancer. And more than one time, she said disparaging things about women who were basically engaged in prostitution. And people were like, I think you're being very judgmental of women who do this as a lifestyle. And I'm like, understand that this is just what the character calls for. I'm not making judgments of women like that. So I'm like, well, actually, let me write a character who is in a situation where she engaged in prostitution, and she explains why she did it. She explains the aftermath of what happened, how that it was something she felt she did. And it goes into more detail in the follow-up book that she explains in more detail why she did it, but it gives her background of how she became involved in it, how her boyfriend forced her even further into it, and what basically she had to do to get out of it. And it's a part of her life that she's like, I'm not ashamed of. But it's definitely one that if I had the choice, I wouldn't have engaged in it if I had other means available to me.
What happened to Diamond's blue Birkin bag that she like just got? Or, I was like,
I think that's hilarious. I will say probably at the crime scene, maybe something happened to it and she didn't even think about it, or it could still be in the house, but she hasn't seen it since.
Okay.
That's what you were thinking about?
It came up like when it happened. I was like, oh no, where's that blue Birkin bag?
You were like
she was so excited.
Jesse's my daughter. I'm going to say you are like the least Birkin bag girl.
I know.
Why would you of all people?
That's why I love. We were talking a few minutes before she joined, a few minutes early, and that was one of her questions she was telling Bailey and I. And I'm like, just because we know her, we've known her forever, and I'm like, that's like the best question, but it's so surprising.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked you even know what a Birkin bag is, and you're my daughter.
I know things. Okay.
Okay. I did want to bring up when I was buying the book, there were reviews, and I didn't want to read the reviews because, you know, you need to make up your own mind, and people say the most bizarre things anyway, as I'm sure you know. But I did my eye caught that, you know, there were people that, well, the way it ends, it's so abrupt ending, and of course we've heard this before, but I thought that was after finishing, I thought, well, that is so funny because, you know, I have to admit, I grew up, maybe it's ageist, but we did, when we went to the movies or we got a book, it had a middle and an end. It was a different kind of mindset. But now I'm like everybody else, I'm streaming series, and it ends season 1, and you got to wait for season 2, and season 2 might not come out for a year or even longer if it's Sopranos or Game of Thrones or whatever. I mean, it's a totally different mindset. The idea that, oh, it has an abrupt ending, and it's like, well, what is that telling you?
Yeah, and that was the thing, because I said I felt like I was giving multiple cues that this is soapy, this is over the top, this is campy. And so when people were reading it, and I was reading the reviews as well, I'm like, I thought from the book cover to the description to the execution that the cues were there, that this is a soap opera, that it's not going to have the end. I mean, I have written books like that, but that wasn't the intent with this one. And I felt like sometimes I wanted to apologize to them, but then other times I'm like, I thought that I kind of let you know that I was going in that direction. I'm sorry you were disappointed or frustrated, but I felt like I was giving the cues throughout the book. Like, this is where we're going. This is the type of roller coaster ride that you're on. And it's not going to be something that it's going to be, everything will be reconciled by the end of the book, because it's just not that style of story.
Well, I think an author has a right to do that. I
Yeah.
mean, if you wanted, you could not write a sequel or not write a next book. You could just say, this is it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I try to avoid that, because, and that's the thing, is that some people were discovering me for the first time, but people who had read Shelly Ellis books, they're like, oh, she's going to do the cliffhanger ending, because they had seen it in my past series. With this, I was getting a lot of new readers by virtue of the type of story that it was. And so when they got to the cliffhanger, they're like, oh, this is wrong. Like, this is breaking so many rules. Like, you do not do that in thrillers or mysteries, that everything is reconciled at the end and everything's a neat bow and everyone explains exactly what happened. And I'm like, you can definitely do that but this was not that book, or this was not the intent of this series. And even then it was like the first in the series. And so that I'm like, I'm not going to leave you hanging. There will be a continuation, but that's just the style that I write under specifically this name, Shelly Ellis.
Mhm.
But I have written books where I do, it's like it's a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Uh-huh.
But that's just not the style that I normally do under that name. I usually do series dramas. So yeah.
So how many names do you write under?
I have written under, from the beginning of my career, I would probably say 4. I just started a new one, LS Stratton. And that one, I have a book coming out in March, and it actually is a book with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everything is tied together, and it's another domestic thriller. It's called Not So Perfect Strangers, and I did a multicultural feminist twist on the Alfred Hitchcock Strangers on a Train. And so that
cool.
comes out in March. Yeah.
Oh, well, I look forward to that. That's one of my favorite movies. One of my favorite Hitchcock movies. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched it several times. I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, so it was really cool to see a movie set in the past that also was set in Washington, D.C., or at least part of it was. And I've always liked the idea. It's just such a kooky concept. And he was just really good at stylizing thrillers and complex characters. So I was like, what would it be like to do that and just turn it upside down, make it women, make it black and white, and introduce all these different concepts but change the story. It doesn't happen on a train, but it's the same concept of 2 women. One introduces the idea, like, we're both trying to get rid of our husbands. Why don't we help each other and just do a crisscross murder? And the same reaction as in the movie, the other one was like, no, but the other one decides to move forward with a plan, and then it goes from there. Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what Vanessa needs to do. Because she's trying to figure out, right? She's trying to like, how to get rid of this guy now.
Well, Vanessa doesn't play well with others, so she wouldn't network with other women to try to get this done. And she actually tried to move forward with a plan in the second book, and it goes about as well as can be expected.
Now, does that second book end in a knot in a bow, or does it leave us at another cliffhanger?
It doesn't leave, I would say it doesn't leave in another cliffhanger, but all the characters, their endings leave the possibility that something else could come after it. So like, people were like, is it going to be a book 3? And I'm like, I don't think so, because I tied up the major storylines. But like most things in life, the characters are saying, okay, this is the next part of my journey. Whether or not you get to see it after this, I'm not sure. But it does not leave in, who's killed, you know who did it, you understand the motivations for why they did it. But as far as where do the characters go next, it leaves open for, there could be a part 3, but you don't need the part 3 in order to finish this book.
Where I feel like we desperately needed a part 2.
I know. I know.
It kept me turning until the end, and then at the very end, it's like the end, and I'm like, "Ooh, that's
I
not the
know.
end."
I know. I always laugh because I will go back and especially old stories, I'll go back and listen to it in the audio version. And I'll like I've forgotten some of the plot lines. So I will get invested in it too. And then it says the end. And I burst out in laughter. And I was like, Shell, I
That's
cannot
funny.
believe you did that. You know, like I can understand why people were so mad. Because I'll start laughing. I was like, oh my God, I ended it like that. And I was like, and I knew that the next book isn't going to come for a year. They're like, oh, well, okay, I see what you guys are saying.
You left us wanting more, which was a good
Yeah.
job.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
But you could even come back 10 years from now and have one of the characters. And then there are other writers that have done that where you think their characters are gone and they write other books. And then they write a book with a character from, years earlier.
And I always keep that in mind as well, because when people were asking, because they were like, one, is there a book 3? And I was like, I'm not sure because I'm leaving that publisher. And 2, what happens to Shelly Ellis? And I always say I would love to continue where the story left off, or at least continue the storyline for some of the characters. When that will happen, unfortunately, because of the publishing business, you never know. But I am as invested in the story as some people who read it. So I wouldn't mind picking this up again. And even people have is like, well, you could have the character do this and this could happen. And I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. I'll keep that in mind.
What is your style when you write? Do you know how things are going to end? Are you a plotter? Do things evolve, and do the characters kind of like, we know some authors have said like the characters tell them what they're going to do or how they're going to be, and it's
Yeah.
like getting to know that person as they write. So what is it for you?
It's usually a mix. I am not a complete pantser, and even more when to me when I had to write kind of soapy and also thrillers, because it's very you have to leave those little nuggets along the way. You got to have an idea of where you're going. So I will do maybe a very basic outline, and I will even write a couple of chapters because I want to get to know the characters, and I'm like some writers too, that sometimes the characters will surprise me. Then I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know you would do something like that, or I didn't know that was in your background. And it's kind of like a getting to know you process. So I will do a basic outline, write a couple of chapters just to get to know the characters and get to know the story, get to feel the tone. Like I said, some stories I write are more campy. Some stories I write is like, this has to be a lot more serious because of the subject matter and who and what I'm talking about. And then from there, I will work with the outline and get maybe to the halfway point where I start to now do chapter by chapter outlines, where I'm getting a greater idea of the story needs to go in this direction because what I was established already. And I will have a basic idea of the ending, but each chapter I know has to include these little tidbits or these little elements about the character so that things don't seem random. I'm introducing things about this character along the way. So when their actions play out towards the end of the story, it makes sense within the context of the story overall. And by then, and I'm rewriting along the way. Some people can do a draft and they even say, I do one draft from beginning to end, and then I go back and edit. I can't do that. I've never been very good at that. I have to read back what I already written and get fairly comfortable with it before I can proceed to the next thing. And even though it sounds like a tedious process, usually I can finish a novel as I've done it as fast as maybe 3 to 4 months, and I've done, and sometimes it's taking me as long as a year. It just depends on the story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Why does no one have any pets?
Yeah.
We're animal lovers here.
Well, I have had stories in the past that have pets. Well, to me, pets are kind of like children. They become part of the story. So if I cannot make the pet a character, I do not include them in the story. Because I wrote a romance once. The guy was a dog owner, and his dog Horatio was basically part of the story. Like, he was the one who allowed, like, he was trying to figure out if he wanted to allow the woman to become his roommate. And so he was like, well, I don't really know, but the dog responded to her. And he's like, okay, well, if my dog likes you, then I know that you're a good person. So if I can't integrate the dog into the story, just like I integrate children into the story, I don't include them. So because there is so much drama going on, I'm like, I don't want the dogs or the cats to be neglected. So I don't want to bring them in if they can't take care of their animals, because to me, that's also a character trait. So if a person is neglectful of their pet, then that says something about the person. So that's why I didn't introduce it, at least in this story.
I kept wanting like, yeah, like Noelle to have like something. 'Cause I'm just like, oh,
I
she's just
know.
all the
It's something to turn her affection towards. But like I said, because she was all over the place and still
Yeah.
trying to figure stuff out, that I'm like, is she gonna really be a good pet owner if I give her a cat or a dog right now? Probably not. She's not
What
in
do
a good
you think she
headspace.
would have? What do
I
you think
think
she would have if she'd been the place to have a pet?
I think she would have been a cat person. That it would have been just a cat who would just like, who would like be able to deal with her personality, that when she was really needy, it's like, okay. But when she's also like uh, going off, that he's like, all right, well, I'll just sit in my corner and just let you figure out what you need to do right now. So I think she would have been more of a cat person.
What
But I
about
think her not having a pet made her more vulnerable
Yeah.
yeah,
to Tariq, because, you know, if she'd had that pet, she might have been a little more not, I mean, she was really vulnerable, particularly after she found out about the other two Mrs. Grays, and that
Yeah.
puts her in a tailspin, and, you know, and Tariq's always there,
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're
And
thinking,
that was,
why is a smart lady why doesn't she see what's going on here? Well,
that
she
she's
was
being
in
manipulated.
this
Yeah.
horribly emotional situation without
Yeah.
her emotional support animal.
Exactly. And that was the thing that she kept saying over and over again. I'm just really lonely. I'm very lonely. And so he's the person who occupies that space for her, that whenever she feels like there's no one else to talk to, he's there. So yeah, she probably could have benefited from a pet, but I guess it's for her that she's not in a good headspace to be able to take care of anyone, at least at that point in her life, including an animal.
Which makes sense. But I feel like she
Yeah.
would have saved herself a lot of pain and heartache if she would have just had a
Oh,
kitten or a
probably.
she might have not gotten in a lot of trouble if it would have been a cat versus that man Tyreek.
Probably. I would agree.
Again, that's an odd question, Jesse, along with the Birkin bag. I
But
mean,
it's very
I
insightful,
liked
though.
them. I'm like, they made me happy. She told me those are her too. And I'm like, those are so darn good.
Those are very insightful questions.
I'm like, I told you we have good questions.
I
I
wanted
love
to
these
ask
girls.
her things that she wasn't asked before, because you always get asked like, "What's your inspiration?"
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah,
and
nobody is like, what is
fine.
It's like, she's
Like,
very
yeah.
lonely. She probably could be useful.
Yeah, and like, I want to know, like, what do you think Vanessa would have? What do you think Diamond would have? Like, what would be their like?
Vanessa
animal-
would have been the teacup poodle type.
That's what I thought too.
I could
The
see
one
that.
that she would just stash in her purse.
Yeah,
So
She'd have a first dog for
Yeah.
sure.
exactly. I could see maybe Diamond would, I could see her like with just a big dog. Like
Yeah.
she would
Yeah.
need one that she would constantly have to like hug, and like
Mhm.
'cause she could see as like her protector. So yeah, I could see her with like just like a mastiff or something. It's just some
Yeah.
weird big dog.
That's
But
what
yeah.
I felt for her too. I was like, she's
Yeah.
gonna have a massive dog.
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely Vanessa is a teacup poodle. And I think
Mhm.
that I would see Noelle with a cat, like just a snuggle cat, or a cat that would be aloof when it wanted to be. Or
Yeah.
yeah,
It would hate Sai.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I still was shocked how well he held it together. I mean, I know it was part of the writing, but the fact that he could juggle 3 wives
Oh
and
yeah.
children, and let's just say, you know what I'm saying, and then still have one of the wives followed, obviously, because he knew she was having an affair. Like, to be that on it was
Well, and
like,
to me, that's the one part that I would say it's actually based in real life. That there are people who have been able to juggle
Yeah.
multiple spouses and
I don't
multiple
know how you
households.
do
I
it.
don't see how you could do it either. I guess even with a convincing cover story, how do you keep it all straight? And like I said, even the wives pose that question, like, how did he do it? Like, how did he not blurt out the wrong name or ask the wrong question or get confused about
The
where? And then
detail.
yeah, and then they think back and they're like, well, there were moments where he would make a mistake or I would catch something that was off, but never in my wildest dreams would I have thought
Well, your mind
that
doesn't go
was
there. I mean, who
exactly,
thinks, well, he's
exactly,
calling me that or something because he's got
exactly.
another wife, or who wants
Yeah,
to assume that at the
exactly.
end of the day,
Right.
even if your mind goes there, because unfortunately things like that happen.
Hmm.
I'm a Lifetime fan myself. I'm like, and I've seen them all play out. And you're like, you know how this, I'm like, I always watch Lifetime to keep me realistic. I'm dating, and Hallmark to keep me hopeful so that I won't stop dating. Is usually how I do it. And I'm like,
Yeah,
but your mind doesn't go there. I'm like, even when
yeah.
you know, there's a red flag or something, Jessie helps me. Jessie, you can tell her what you do for a living, maybe, but she always helps me. And she's like, Brittany, that's a red flag. And I'm like, sure. I'm like, it's kind of pink. I don't know if it's red. She's like, no, that's a red flag, Brittany.
Yeah, but I'm like, it's human nature too that if you are already invested in a relationship, that you don't want to think of the worst case
No,
scenario.
you
And
tell
I think
yourself stories.
exactly. So that's what
Yeah.
the women that they're all like, well, maybe he did this because he's super busy or he's under stress
Right.
or like if it was an affair, I don't know if it's a long-term affair or something like that. And
Yeah.
so they are trying to create these own stories in their head that most of the time he didn't even have to because they were so invested. And for each woman, he tried to fulfill the role that they wanted in a man. Vanessa wanted a provider. So he was like, I gave you ample money. I gave you all the things that you wanted. I took care of our children. For Noelle, it was a sense of stability because she didn't have very much in her childhood. So he was the one that when she had her breakdown, that he stepped forward and told the police, it's okay, I'll take care of her. I understand what's wrong. You don't have to get involved. I'll handle this. And she appreciated that. And for Diamond, it was kind of a father figure, to be honest. That she didn't really have that in her life, and he kind of stepped in and called her his princess, and that he was the one who would protect her from men like her ex-boyfriend. So he found these ways to just needle himself into their lives so that they could excuse the other things that they, like you would say, the red flags that would give them pause. And even Noelle talks about, like, there were red flags, but I made excuses for it because I was invested in making this relationship work. And he knew what to do to get each individual woman invested because he's a con artist.
I was saying a good one.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah, but you know, it's true because since I watched Discovery ID, recently there was one about one of these like Dear John guys. And this guy had a whole series of women who he had gotten their life savings and his name all over their assets and their credit cards. And I mean, he had multiple women, and they interviewed these women. These were smart women. These were women, they were independent. Many of them had their own businesses. He knew exactly his demographic. He didn't go for the wealthiest women because he knew that their money would all be managed by somebody else. He went for women who were middle class to upper middle class who had assets but didn't have money managers. I mean, he was very specific, and because he knew that way he could get in there without any kind of guardrails. But when they interviewed these women, these were not gullible women. These were women who had a lot going on in their lives. Yet, as you've said, he knew exactly what to say to each one of them, and the gifts and the vacations. And you get the gifts and the vacations, and you're so beautiful and you're so smart and you're so wonderful, that some of the things, some of the little details can slide.
Yeah. And that's what, for me, and when people are like, God, these women are so stupid. And I'm like, they are, but they aren't. And to me, it's kind of like, be a little bit more sympathetic, because if there is somebody who is specifically honed in on what is the one thing that is important to you in a relationship, and they target it over and over and over again, even though you do notice the other things, you're more willing to forgive them, because they're like, they essentially give me what I need, the one thing that I asked for in a serious relationship. And that was his talent, that he understood this is the thing that will push me over with each woman. And this is the thing that, as long as I'm giving them that thing, they're okay with all the other shortcomings.
They're going to overlook the other, bits.
Exactly. So, but then they all realized that what he was doing all along is that it was manipulation. It wasn't love. It wasn't, even though he would rationalize it very different, but he's a raving narcissist. So he always has justification for his behavior. But that they're like, you specifically found things about me that you knew was my Achilles heel, and you targeted it, and that's not love. So yeah, each woman has to come to terms with that. Even by the end of the book, Diamond still hasn't. She will by the second, but she hasn't by the first book.
Poor Diamond being in prison, jail, locked
I know.
up. I'm like, I did
know.
not see it turning out that way for her when they were carting her away. I thought she was going to be fine. Like, I thought she did right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, she's made peace with her past, essentially. And then all of a sudden she finds herself being locked up. And I'm like,
Yeah, I know. That's what people are like. So you're going to redeem her? Or I was like, I would be nicer to her in the second book. Don't worry that I wouldn't leave her there, because I always feel bad too when I do that to characters. It makes for a good story, but it's like, oh, like, why'd you do that to her?
So and I'm like, I
yeah.
liked her. I felt for her, you know.
I know.
Like, I felt the most
book,
for her. I feel like,
well, she was the most vulnerable, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think it wouldn't have had the same impact.
Had it
For
have
me,
happened to
it wouldn't have had the
Vanessa
same
or
impact if it'd been Vanessa or Noelle, because you kind of have confidence that they've got the
they'll figure out their
intellectually,
way out of
financially, whatever frame of reference they're going to. But Diamond, I think that hit harder.
Yeah,
it did, because she had been through the most. And you're exactly right, Phyllis. She was the most vulnerable.
And that's why, to me too, she's the one who has to go through the most, because she still hasn't settled in exactly what he's done to her. And so I'm like, all right, I got to put you through the fire so that when you get out the other side, you're a stronger person, because you're still not accepting that he manipulated you, that this was a form of abuse. And you're just like, but he's still better than the other guy. So for me, it's like, she's the one who has to go through a little bit more in order for her to come out on the other side.
Every time she talked to Julian, I just wanted to be like, hang up the phone. Don't
Yeah.
go over there. Do not pick him up. Don't let him up. Like, no.
Yeah.
Just say no. And she was doing so good at like trying to say no. Like, she started,
Yeah.
she was like, no, you're not coming up. And I'm like, good girl, stay that way. Don't let him up.
But then she still has the conditioning that she hasn't broken, and she acknowledges it, that she's like, if I talk to him, I know eventually I'm going to break down, because I'm so used to this. And that's what she physically ran away, like separated herself from her old life, because she was like, once I go back, I'm going to get sucked back in. I know I'm going to get sucked back in. And even then, the only thing that keeps her from completely getting sucked into Julian again is knowing that I have a husband. Like, I have someone who can protect me and someone who can take care of me. It's not because of inner confidence in herself. It's because of what she believes she can still that she has with Cyrus. And so by the second novel, I wanted her to have more confidence in herself, in her autonomy, that she doesn't need Cyrus or a man like him to take care of her in order to be what she needs to be. And she's still struggling with that.
Can you tell us if Cyrus gets what he deserves? Because like I'm
Yes.
so disappointed in him, and I need
Yes.
some like getting shot was not apparently didn't
Yes.
phase him. You know what I'm saying? Like he's still playing all his games.
Well,
Calling all the
he gets
wives.
what he deserves. Some people said it was too quick. They were like, you should have dragged out his punishment a lot more. But he gets what he deserves by the second book.
Good.
That's good to know. I'm like, that makes me feel better.
What is I've forgotten the name of Vanessa's boy toy. Her
Bilal.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was funny.
Yeah, he was my himbo for the series. It was fun writing him because he's like he unfortunately, because he's kind of a bimbo, he can get circles run around him by Vanessa, but it was fun. It was fun writing him.
I hope he finds love.
Yeah, his storyline actually goes downhill by the second
Yeah,
book.
I was
I'll
about
warn
to
you that in
say,
advance.
because like him and Vanessa were plotting.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
at the very end, yeah, he's like ready to go. He's like, okay.
Yeah,
Is Vanessa
He's-
really pregnant or was that manipulation?
that was
Brittany.
manipulation.
I had to do
It was manipulation.
that's thinking on her feet, but I'm like, I
That's
need to
sad.
know, is she pregnant or was that just straight up
Brittany?
manipulation? I mean, like, good manipulation. See, don't you? Oh, get election.
Yeah, it was manipulation on her part. It was
It's
unfortunately.
smart
it's the other-
thinking because he's like,
Yeah.
oh, we're gonna do it.
Well, and that's the thing is that she, in some ways, Vanessa is very much like her husband. She
Her mom is mean though. Can we just say her mama scares the poo out of me? Can we just have a heart to heart for a second? Her mama, like every time her mama was like talking,
I'm
she's
glad-
making me sweat. I'm
I'm
like,
glad
"Alright,
you
her
brought
mama-
her up.
I'm
I'm
like,
glad
we
you
just-
brought
we
her
just-
up.
we
I
need
like
a
that
moment
sharp
to talk
edge she
to-
provided.
Yeah,
And
we
she
need to
was-
talk about her
she's
mama for a
Yeah,
second.
her mom to me, a lot of people talk about her as a character because they weren't actually prepared for how ruthless her mother is.
That's a
and-
nice way to put it. Her mama scared me.
Yeah, that I was like, she's ruthless, she's coarse, that she has no qualms with expressing her opinion and putting it
No.
in the sharpest version possible. But it also gives insight to who Vanessa is because she was raised by this woman. So she kind of is like, I'm trying to be more like my mother. I aspire to be more ruthless like my mother, but her emotions constantly get in the way from her. That she actually does care about Cyrus, at least for most of the book. And her mother would never even entertain. She would say, "This is just ridiculous. I don't even know why you're this invested." So yeah, that's she is the little devil on Vanessa's shoulder most of the time.
She plays a good one. I know you only had 30 minutes. We want to be
Yeah.
respectful. Before you go, I wanted to make sure we could take a screenshot. We always take a picture to post. Does anybody have the book to hold up?
I do.
Nice.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm like, I listened. All right, guys. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone.
Thank you for
Thanks
joining
for
us.
Very
being
nice to
here.
meet you.
It was nice meeting you too.
It was fun to have you with us.
All right. You guys have a great weekend.
You
Thank
too.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
We're looking
Bye.
forward to the second book. Can't wait to see
Oh.
where everybody heads and what trouble they get into.
Let me know what you think.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks. Happy Sunday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.